Welcome to Session 2 of Quality Assurance Common Sense. This is the second session of a 4-webinar series put on by the Tribal Air Monitoring Support Center, and we are part of ITEP and the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. And the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium is represented by Chris Fish, who is on the line with us today. And today we're going to talk about quality assurance for projects that don't involve making measurements with an instrument. So projects where you are taking a survey of concerns about air quality that are in your community, a project involving using questionnaires, or perhaps surveying homes for indoor air quality issues. You still have to apply QA principles and write a quality assurance project plan so that the results of your project are respected and you can use them towards your goals of meeting your environmental program's needs. So today on the line we have Chris Fish, and Chris is from the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and he has provided wonderful examples, and his contact information is in the contacts list for the course. The objective of today's training is that by the end of the session, and by doing the homework and working with me and Chris one-on-one if you would like, that you will end up with what you need to know about quality assurance for information management. So people think, well, I'm not gathering data in terms of numbers, but you still are gathering data. It's in the form of information. Surveys, assessments, checklists of potential indoor air quality issues, and in common sense terms, what is QA for such a project, and what parts of a quality assurance project plan are necessary, and then principles of data management for managing the information that you get. We will have homework for this session as well, and this is a picture of me waiting for your call. So we are available to talk with you folks individually. I want to emphasize that with all our webinars and all our classes, these are very strict. There is no such thing as a dumb question zone. So whether you ask a question during the webinar or call us afterwards, anything is open. Please ask your question. The only dumb question is that question that you didn't ask. And chances are, if you have a question, other people at the webinar have the same question, and you'll be doing them a favor by asking it. So we're going to talk about an example project, and this project involves gathering information to find out possible sources of poor air quality and to educate the community. So we've got two objectives. So document possible sources of poor air quality using a questionnaire, as well as educating ourselves about the sources of poor air quality in our community. And you want to make clear that these objectives drive the quality assurance that we do. Keep asking yourself, is what we're doing getting us to our goal? And as long as you keep asking yourself that and you document it in your written material, like your quality assurance project plan, or if you have procedures in those, you are applying solid QA principles. So one of the most important things to remember is to be specific about your objectives. So your objectives will include some sort of boundary. So these are the questions that you would document in your QAPP. But it's before you jump into a QAPP and start writing, the signature page and project description, it's really best to think about first the objectives of the project. Do you want the questionnaire to include information on residential issues, such as wood smoke, as well as outdoor air, such as road dust or waste burning? Think about what the boundaries of your project are in terms of both like the physical land, the homes or buildings that you want information on, as well as like the types of issues that you want to gather information on. So more objectives are more specific. So your goal for the number of completed questionnaires. Well, first of all, what's the definition of completed? More than half of the questions answered? Maybe you have specific questions that must be answered for it to be considered a complete questionnaire. And as you develop your questionnaire, you have to think about that. What's your goal for the number of public meetings? What's your goal for how many people attend these meetings? If you've got these two guys at your public meeting, that would probably be a pretty significant public meeting and might be really fun. So, for example, our boundary is the boundary of our village. And this may or may not work for you depending upon where your community lives. Our target is homes only, so residences, maybe not schools, or maybe you do want to include schools and public buildings. Our questionnaire will gather information on indoor air quality only, perhaps. And then our goal is to obtain completed questionnaires from at least 75% of the homes. So these are examples of what specifically you would write in your quality assurance project plan. Now, completeness. For example, a completed questionnaire contains answers for at least the questions that are the minimum you need to use that questionnaire in a summary. So think about how you're going to summarize the information, and if you get a questionnaire back that has only some of the questions answered, can you use it? And then define completeness according to how you could use that questionnaire. So for example, the necessary items might be the address, how big the house is, how old it is, the heating source, the secondary heating source, in terms of perhaps multiple wood stoves or a pellet stove. And think about the other category. A lot of times every single question has a set of possible answers and then other. And try to minimize use of this other answer because that'll make it hard for you to summarize. So really try to include all the possible answers that you can think of as check-offs or multiple choice answers, and try to minimize your use of that other category. For that public outreach goal, an example objective would be that our goal for the number of public meetings is 2. An initial public meeting to explain the project and a final meeting to explain the results. And our goal is to have at least 20 people at each meeting, for example. And I highly recommend free food. I've used free food to get people into my talks at, National Tribal Forum and different meetings that we've had. I always try to have free cookies or free chocolate. Free pizza would probably be even better. So for the education goal, this is a little mushier because how do you define people learning about indoor air quality? Well, perhaps you can be specific and say every home receives a one-page description of what is dry wood, for example, to be burning wood efficiently. Every person at a public meeting takes away something about indoor air quality issues. And this is just a screenshot of a flyer that was used in the Bristol Bay Association, and thank you, Sue Flensburg, for providing this information. And this is just an example of a flyer, and this is in the course downloads zipped folder that's on our website for this course. So, you can't really say, well, I know that the 15 people out of the 20 learned something about indoor air quality, but you can know that you at least gave away 15 of these flyers to the people, and you dropped off a flyer at every home explaining the project. Plan for success. So think ahead. You're going to be, at some point, like this young woman, standing up with a table of results that you've compiled the answers into various categories, and you're trying to explain it. You're trying to make sense of it. So think ahead to being this woman and try to get as complete and useful information as possible. So for example, will you interview them or will you drop it off and ask them to fill it out? Consistency and repeatability is the key to getting good results that you can summarize, which is what you're interested in, results that you can summarize and that are accurate. The main question in terms of repeatability, and this is quality control, would somebody else filling out the questionnaire for the same home give the same answers? Ideally, yes. So if your questions are written in a really clear way, then that would be more likely. Think it through to the end. How will you ensure enough completeness of each questionnaire and the total number of these completed questionnaires? So will you go back and ask again? If you get questionnaires back that aren't complete, will you do that? Or will somebody else do that? Or will you drop it off again? Will you call them on the phone? Incentives for completion can be really little and really useful, like, the I voted stickers. Something like that. I'm a big fan of freebies, even little things that are something that people can take with them, perhaps with some reminders, even just a sticker or a flyer giving them information is something to mark that they took the time out and completed this questionnaire. Hold your meetings in conjunction with other meetings, or at a school where people are already going to be there, so that you can have as many people as possible hear your information. Serve food. And talk to important community members and get their input when planning. This is really, really important because you need buy-in by the people that are respected in the community, and as soon as possible get their buy-in to the project to help ensure success. So document your ideas in a QAPP. So this is where you write down all this stuff, and this is where a quality assurance project plan is useful because it puts everything in one place. So first of all, an example of the project description, how well you will do the work, how you will do the work, a schedule, the responsibilities of the people involved, example objectives. So again, the definition of a complete questionnaire. For example, every questionnaire considered complete has at least questions number 1 through 6 answered, for example. Completeness for the project. So again, what would signify completeness? What would you be satisfied with? And is also for the public meetings. What's considered the success for your 2 public meetings in the case of this example project? So just going through what are required. So in our first session last week, we talked about the different elements of a quality assurance project plan, and I'm just going to review them now, as well as the graded approach. So EPA says that only certain elements of a QAPP are necessary for a Category 4 project, a project not involving making measurements, but involving gathering data in the form of information. So a signature page, that's really key, even for such a project, because it's an important project and people have jobs to do, and a signature page forces them at least to read through the QAPP that they're signing. The project description, just briefly, doesn't have to be maybe sometimes more than 3/4 of a page long. The overview of the project, the boundaries in terms of the physical boundaries, the time period, so your schedule, who's working on the project, and then your objectives or goals and your criteria for how you're going to try to meet those goals, for how good is good enough to say you met your goals. So again, keep in mind your goals as you're working on the project and how everything you do gets you toward meeting those goals and measuring how close you're getting. So for example, how many complete questionnaires are coming in every week. Continuing the elements of a quality assurance project plan, the design of the project. So in this case, it's, for example, like the number of homes to be surveyed, the questions to be asked, the public meetings. Again, it can be really brief. Now, this section, analytical method requirements, this is a hallelujah section for this type of project because you're not using an instrument. So you can just say, this section is not applicable, but quality control is applicable. So again, in the quality assurance project plan, you don't necessarily have to say how you're going to do everything as long as you've got procedures. Now, for a project like this, you might as well write it all up in the QAPP unless you want your procedures short and attached towards the end. But for this type of a project, quality control involves, for example, double checking the data entry of answers. And whenever you talk about quality assurance or quality control, it's really important to have another person, at least at some points during the project, review what you're doing. I know I do a lot better when I know somebody else is looking over my shoulder, and every time I give something to somebody else to review, they find ways to improve it. So we all do better with somebody else reviewing what our plans are. So you may have to look for such a person, somebody who could review the questionnaire, who could review your report before it goes final. And also when you do the entry into a table, for example, of the results of the questionnaire, are you going to go back and double check every single one? Ideally, it'd be nice if you could get a second person to do that. So finally, the elements of a quality assurance project plan include data management. And again, this is just the requirements for how you'll gather, store, review, compile, which just means typing into a table, for example, the answers, go back and get answers on incompletes, and then also really important, how you're going to safeguard personal information. If you gather information about what's going on in people's homes, for example, it's really important to keep that personal information secure. So lock it into a file cabinet and not release any personal information in your summaries about the project. So more objectives could be, for example, our goal is to obtain complete questionnaires from all the 100 homes within village boundaries. Or, for example, here's a new one. Our goal is to determine where and how household solid waste is disposed of. And here's a great picture of a scarecrow in the form of a stuffed banana at a place where solid waste is disposed of. And you may want to have like options like this built into your questionnaire where you say, do you dispose of the solid waste at this facility, for example, giving people clear choices so that your results are easily interpreted. So the sampling design. So again, safety and privacy come first. Keep the questionnaires with you that people have filled out. Don't leave them in your unlocked truck. Don't leave them out on your desk. Make sure that anything private you keep private unless you've gotten clear consent from the people who've given you that information. Will you gather information door to door? Will you call people on the phone? Will you call people back if they've got incomplete questionnaires? And if you can, think through and try to be specific about the time of day you're going to contact people, the time of year, when are people most likely to be home and not busy, because that information can really help you increase your completeness. So the quality assurance, again, is the big picture of continually stepping back and asking yourself if you can improve how you're doing the project. So again, just like when you buy something, and now our receipts are like 3 feet long, and at the bottom it says, call this number to complete a survey and you'll be entered to win a prize. That's because all the companies have quality assurance project plans, and they're trying to gather information about how well they're doing so they can do this continual improvement process and take more of our money, which is their goal. But your goal is to have a successful project. So like as you start to get completed questionnaires, ask yourself, do they make sense? In the homes that you know, are the answers what you would expect? And this is a QC check where you're trying to assess the accuracy of results that come in. And don't continue to use a flawed questionnaire just because you started it. There's nothing wrong with revising the questionnaire at the beginning or even in the middle of your project. You'd rather have a halfway successful project than a no-way successful project. So have a sentence in your QAPP on how you will safeguard completed questionnaires. Lock them in a locked file cabinet. How you're going to get complete answers, how you're going to get accurate responses. So go through the questionnaire at a community meeting and explain how the questionnaire is supposed to be answered. As people are chomping away on their pizza, they will be forced to listen to you, and that will boost the number of accurate questionnaires you get back. How you're going to summarize the results, you can just say, we're going to summarize them in a table. And who will look at your report before it goes final? So quality control is repeatability. So the goal for repeatability is that if the same questions were asked again at some of the homes, the same answers would be recorded. So like when you make radon measurements in a house and 10% of the measurements have to be placed with duplicate side-by-side radon canisters, the goal for that is to look at how different they are, because ideally they would read the same answer because they are sampling radon from the same packet of air. Well, this is the same sort of thing as repeatability for a survey. So think through how you can boost your repeatability. So use multiple choice so your answers can be consistent. And this is really critical. Pilot test your questionnaire in a few homes before you start. Don't just write a questionnaire and then say, okay, we're going to blanket the whole community with these. Pilot test it, document your results, and then modify your questionnaire based upon the fact that, you know, some of the questions people didn't understand. So rewrite those questions, for example. Quality control is checking up on yourself. And this can be really brief. At least every 2 weeks, I'll review the progress and document our progress in a short email to myself. Emails to yourself are wonderful. I email myself all the time because then it's documented, it's on the server, and you can also search for it as opposed to searching for all those post-it notes and pieces of paper that are flying all around. If there's more than one person on the project, for example, we could say this: at least every 2 weeks we'll exchange completed questionnaires and review them for legibility and completeness, and we'll follow up on differences that we find in terms of our interpretation of the completed questionnaires. External review. So this is a picture of Chris Fish's sleeping bag because he's so committed to his job that he does a lot of travel, and he will, if you're funded, assist you in performing some sort of external review. And if possible, he can come there and even spend the night in his sleeping bag. So if feasible, and you can write in your quality assurance project plan something like, if feasible, or if funds will allow, the project officer will visit once during the project, will review material before and after, and we will take corrective actions based on his recommendations. So ideally, somebody other than you should review your project summary files, so that's like your table where you compile all the results, and any final reports, just to make sure that they're interpreting your results the same way and it makes sense and you haven't missed anything. So the data management flow, and you can list these in your QAPP. Again, it doesn't have to be long. You can just use bullet points. So this is an example of a list of the events that have to happen. You're going to agree upon the goals, develop a questionnaire, pilot test the questionnaire in, say, 2 or 3 homes, revise the questionnaire, have a public meeting where you explain the project and you go through the questionnaire and talk about how to answer the questions. And then you're going to start gathering completed questionnaires, however you're going to do it. If you're going to telephone each home, if you're going to distribute them. A calendar is critical when you're planning this because these things take time. So really think through about what is possible in terms of how long it's going to take. The next step would be, what are you going to do with the questionnaires? You're going to keep them in a binder. You're going to put them in the binder into the file cabinet. You're going to keep them alphabetically by name or by date. Incompletes will be tagged with post-it notes, and perhaps you'll have a sheet at the front of the binder with the notes of the names of the questionnaires that have to be followed up on. How long are you going to take before you follow up? As soon as possible is best. so that people remember what questionnaire you're talking about. Are you going to scan the completed questionnaires, save them as PDFs, and save them in your computer? I highly recommend that. Data entry of results. Then you're going to have your final public meeting, and you're going to write a report. At all of these steps, think about the time it's going to take. Do a reality check. That's where a second person is really helpful. And make sure that you're being realistic about the schedule and how you're going to do this. So a logbook, I highly recommend a logbook for you. I have 5 logbooks, one for every project. I have a logbook for this webinar series where I write down the notes I take when I talk to people who have been really generous with providing information. And you can keep track of phone calls. That might be really, really critical when you're dealing with a lot of people. It's embarrassing to call somebody up again and they say, you called me and asked me all these questions yesterday. That's really annoying. So it's good to keep a logbook so you can track that kind of thing. Will you be double checking the data entry? Your funding agency might want to know your progress. So are you keeping on schedule? Date stamp or write the date on everything, even revisions to partly completed questionnaires. So you may end up with a questionnaire where you had to go back to those people 2 or 3 times. You may have a date when you first got it back. You may have a date, and you can just stamp the date and then write next to the stamp your initials and what it is. So we received this back in the office because it was dropped off at the public meeting, or it was dropped off at the school. And then you look at it, you realize it's incomplete. You call them on the phone, you gather more information, date stamp it again, and write your initials and say the questions 7, 8, and 9 were answered by talking with the person on the phone. So the rules of data management, write it down or else it didn't happen. Reproducibility, could somebody else looking at your papers understand what happened? So would somebody else looking at all your date stamps and all your scribbled notes on these questionnaires be able to make sense of what happened? Just keep writing notes and try to make them clear, and that'll be the case, that somebody could say, oh yeah, okay, this looks like a mess, but I understand what happened here. So write down way more than you think you'll need. Again, make sure that you never erase, always cross out, and the new entry, initial, and date. This is an example of a logbook from the Seldovia Village, and the reason I have it in this webinar, even though their project involves making measurements, is you can see that a logbook is basically just a lot of scribbled notes. And that's what a logbook is supposed to be, with date, and the more notes the better. So a good way, I doubt that people will be audited, but everybody is going to have their reports reviewed. So a good way to keep yourself organized is to pretend that you're going to be audited. So use binders, boxes. I really love label makers. Label everything. So you have a box with questionnaires that are blank. You have another box with questionnaires that are incomplete. You have a box for questionnaires that haven't been reviewed yet. You have a box with questionnaires that are complete, and you will stuff all these boxes into your locked file cabinet at the end of the day, but you'll be able to find them easily. Checklists, whatever you do again and again, it's a really good idea to have a checklist for. Allot some time to staying organized. You set up a separate email inbox for the project. Taking photos is critical. Take a lot of photos, download them off of your computer, and label them as soon as possible, so both so that you'll have more room on your camera, but also so that you remember where the picture was taken and the date. If you have your files organized in your computer the same way that they're actually organized on paper in your file cabinet, that makes things really easy. So think about setting up a parallel file folder system, both for your paper files and for your computer files. In your reports, so you have to think about what you're going to write for reports and describe that briefly, just maybe in the terms of a list, in your QAPP. So you might develop flyers to advertise a public meeting. You might develop posters that you're going to have put up around the community and during the public meeting. Make sure that you have got sign-in lists for your meetings. Note what questions were asked. That's really, really interesting to the granting agency. Keep track of emails, both to the granting agency and any partners. Are you going to have quarterly reports? Are you going to have a final report? Just list these in your QAPP. Think ahead about what you're going to want to report on and make sure that you're gathering that information and you track it as you go. So like your progress each week, how many questionnaires did you get back, for example. That's it for session 2 of this webinar. It's relatively short because we don't have to talk about numbers and data analysis. I want to emphasize again that we are ready to assist you one-on-one, and our contact information is in all the emails that we've sent out to you. So we look forward to getting your completed homework and seeing you at the next webinar, in which we're going to talk about quality assurance and quality control for projects that do involve using instrumentation, and we're going to look at examples with the dust track and other particulate matter measurements, such as mini-balls, for example. So we'll look more at quality control and actual data in next session next Thursday. Thank you.